Betrayal at the beach house. I never thought my life would turn into something out of a bad soap opera. But here I am, writing this, still trying to process how everything collapsed around me. It started like any other month, a gathering with my best friends, a tradition we'd held for years. We were just a bunch of guys in our late 30s and early 40s who had grown up together, bonded over surfing, and now made it a point to meet at my beach house once a month. My beach house wasn't anything fancy, a cozy, slightly weathered two-story home that always smelled like salt and freedom. In the living room, we had an old surfboard mounted on the wall, a relic from our younger days when we thought we'd ride waves forever. Now, we were more about barbecues, beer, and reminiscing. There was Howard, the perfectionist who couldn't stand anything out of place. Then Jeremy, the loudmouth jokester whose humor sometimes crossed the line. Kyle, the quiet architect, always observing, saying little but always listening. David, the ex-military guy built like a tank who had seen things he never talked about. And Jon, the polished lawyer, always in a crisp suit, the guy who seemed to have it all together. And me? I was just George, the guy who owned the beach house. That night, we were drinking and catching up when Howard pulled out his phone, showing us a picture of his son, scowling like a storm cloud. Apparently, the kid had been acting out, bad grades, back-talking teachers, the whole rebellious streak. Howard was losing his mind over it. We all gave him the usual advice. Kids go through phases, it's normal. Then Jeremy, in classic Jeremy fashion, smirked and said, "Maybe he's not even yours, man." The joke landed like a punch to the gut. The room went dead silent. Then Kyle, in his usual calm way, shrugged and said, "Why not just get a DNA test? Clear the air." At first we laughed it off. But the idea stuck. Maybe it was the beer, maybe it was curiosity, or maybe it was just the weight of Howard's frustration. But the next thing we knew, 6 fully grown men were walking into a paternity clinic, trying to explain to a very unimpressed receptionist why we all needed tests. And that's where it all started to unravel. A week later, we met at Jon's apartment, a sleek, modern space that felt more like a high-end hotel than a home. We sat around, drinks in hand, pretending we weren't anxious. Howard opened his results first. He let out a breath so deep it was like he'd been holding it for years. 99.99%. His kid was his. One by one, the guys read their results. No surprises. Then we all turned to Jon. He was drinking more than usual. His hands shook as he opened the envelope. He read it. Then he read it again. His face turned pale. He swallowed hard, staring at the paper as if trying to change the numbers with sheer willpower. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, he said, "Jenna isn't mine." The room spun. The air got thick, heavy. The number on the paper, 25%. Not a stranger's child. Not a random mistake. Meant one thing. His own brother. The fallout was a hurricane. Jon confronted his wife, Alicia. She screamed, denied it, then tried to twist the story. She stormed into his office, making a spectacle, calling him a liar in front of his co-workers. Then she ran to my wife, sobbing, spinning a web of excuses. But Maria saw through it. Alicia's stories kept changing, contradicting themselves. Desperate, Alicia called Kyle late at night, crying, begging him to talk to Jon for her. But Kyle wasn't the type to get pulled into someone else's mess. And the deeper Jon dug, the uglier the truth became. It wasn't a one-time thing. It wasn't a mistake. Alicia and Jon's brother, Steven, had been having an affair for 8 years. Before the wedding, after the wedding, all the way through. While Jon was working late to provide for his family, they were sneaking around in hotels, spending his money. She had even forged his signature on loans, funneling money to Steven, who had burned through it on gambling, bad investments, luxury watches, and flashy cars. They had planned to run away together. And the worst part? Steven had been showering Jenna with expensive gifts, bought with Jon's own stolen money, trying to buy her love, trying to take everything from him. It all exploded at Jenna's birthday dinner. A fancy restaurant, smiling faces, a charade of happiness. Steven had the audacity to stand up and toast Jon, thanking him for being such a great brother. Then he handed Jenna an extravagant gift, bought with Jon's money, and started boasting about his so-called financial success, making Jon look like a fool in front of everyone. That was it. The final straw. Jon stood up, pulled the DNA test from his pocket, held it up for everyone to see. 25% probability, he said, his voice cutting through the room like a blade. Then he laid it all out. The affair. The lies. The stolen money. He even had printed out emails, concrete proof of their plan to run away together. Photos of their little secret vacations, the gifts, the deception. He made sure everyone knew. Alicia's parents gasped in horror. Her mother fainted. Her father tried to punch Jon, but guests held him back. Steven, the coward, tried to slip out the back door, only to be caught by Jon's father, an ex-military man who knocked him flat. The restaurant erupted into chaos. Someone recorded the whole thing. By the next day the video was everywhere. And just like that, everything Alicia and Steven had built, their lies, their plans, their stolen future, crumbled in front of them. And Jon? He walked out of that restaurant a broken man, but at least now he knew the truth. Jon's father wasted no time. After speaking with Steven, he drove straight to his son's apartment, the same apartment where Steven's wife, Kelly, also lived. Without hesitation, he gathered all of Steven's belongings, dumped them outside, and left a note for the entire family. The message was clear: Steven was no longer his son. Jon, however, received a different kind of treatment. Their father spoke with him privately, expressing his deep disappointment in how things had unfolded but reassuring Jon that he still loved him. Kelly, Steven's wife, reacted with something stronger than words. She did more than just scream, she took action. Without delay, she filed for divorce and locked down all their joint accounts, effectively cutting Steven off from any more financial access. She hired a lawyer and didn't stop there. Fueled by rage and betrayal, she stormed into Jon's house, confronted Alicia and let her have it, not just verbally but physically. She slapped Alicia so hard that she yanked out chunks of her hair in the process. I don't condone violence, but in that moment I couldn't blame her. Meanwhile, Jon disappeared. He withdrew from everyone, isolating himself in one of his other beach houses, not mine, but another one that had once been a sanctuary. Now it felt like a prison. He stopped answering calls, stopped seeing anyone. He ordered food online but barely ate. Instead, he sat for hours, staring at the ocean. Later he told me he was haunted by dreams of the DNA test, the betrayal, and the life he thought he had. At his lowest, he seriously considered selling the property, disappearing into some distant wilderness and ending it all. But he couldn't. Too many memories. Too many loose ends. Jon let himself go, drinking heavily, neglecting hygiene, barely changing clothes. He simply gave up. While Jon was wasting away, Alicia and Steven were living it up, in Jon's house. After being thrown out of his own apartment, Steven moved in with Alicia. They acted like nothing had happened. They went on shopping sprees, indulging in fine dining, and throwing loud parties that disturbed the neighbors. It was sickening. Alicia even had the audacity to start remodeling Jenna's room, as if she planned to stay indefinitely. Steven, the absolute bastard, parked his expensive cars in Jon's driveway, flaunting his presence. Jon's panic attacks worsened. The mere sight of Alicia and Steven together was enough to send him spiraling. One night, in a drunken haze, he accidentally shattered a framed photo of Jenna. He cut his palm deeply on the broken glass but didn't even seem to notice. That was the moment we, his friends, knew we had to step in. We gathered at my place. Howard came armed with a stack of bank statements and, with JK's help, a set of forged documents that exposed Alicia and Steven's financial deception. He didn't just show us the evidence. He threw it onto the table in a fury, papers flying everywhere. Jeremy was so enraged he swore he would beat Steven senseless. Even David, our ex-military friend, half-jokingly suggested making them disappear. Kyle, usually the calmest among us, was visibly shaken. 4 hours we argued, debated legality, and strategized our next move. Howard did some research on landlord-tenant laws and eviction procedures. Eventually we came up with a plan. Jeremy would be the muscle. David devised a backup strategy in case anything went wrong. We even established a code word, pineapple, to signal that the mission was complete. Step 1. Get Jon out of the way. We knew inviting him for a casual hangout would be too suspicious. Instead, Kyle orchestrated a legal consultation, requesting Jon's expertise on a serious property matter. It was a valid enough excuse to keep him occupied. We fed him, kept him drinking, and distracted him with conversation, all while our operation was underway. Meanwhile, the rest of us stormed Jon's house. The confrontation was explosive. Alicia immediately played the victim, crying and screaming that we had no right to be there. Steven tried to act tough, but you could see the fear in his eyes. We took pictures and videos of everything. The lavish purchases, the takeout receipts, the hidden luxury items, even documents proving they had been planning to buy a house together with Jon's stolen money. We didn't just pack their belongings, we hurled them out the windows. Clothes, shoes, furniture, golf clubs, it all piled up on the front lawn like some chaotic yard sale from hell. Jeremy unleashed his fury on Steven, calling him every name in the book and warning him to never go near Jon or Jenna again. When I found Alicia's secret stash of valuables, I threw them at her feet. "Here's your blood money," I spat. She collapsed into hysterics, screaming that she would call the police. Jeremy, ever the smooth talker, reminded her that Jon was the sole owner of the house. He also pointed out that, thanks to their prenup, she had no legal claim to anything. Howard got in Steven's face, backing him against the garage door, seething with pure disgust. With the chaos still unfolding, I sent Jon a single word: pineapple. Kyle and Jon drove back. Jon was a wreck, his emotions a volatile mix of rage, relief, anxiety, and heartbreak. He kept murmuring to himself, reliving the last 8 years, trying to make sense of it all. He was terrified of what this meant for Jenna. When they arrived, it was a scene out of a movie. Alicia and Steven's belongings littered the lawn. Neighbors watched from their porches, murmuring amongst themselves. Alicia stood red-faced, shrieking at Jon, blaming him for ruining her life. Steven, for once, was silent, eyes cast downward in shame. Jon didn't acknowledge them. He walked past them as if they were ghosts and stepped inside. The house was eerily quiet. The furniture remained, but everything personal, every small touch that made it home, was gone. Jenna had been spared from witnessing the chaos. She was at a friend's house, a playdate carefully planned by her friend's mother, who had seen through Alicia's act long ago. But when Jenna returned, her questions were crushing. Is Uncle Steven my real dad? Jon felt physically ill. Then she asked the one thing that shattered him completely. Don't you love me anymore? Jon broke down. He held her tightly, swearing that nothing could ever change his love for her. But Alicia wasn't done. She stormed in, grabbed Jenna, and took off before anyone could stop her. That first night alone was unbearable for Jon. The next morning he sat in Jenna's room, surrounded by her drawings and toys, suffocating under the weight of what had happened. He stayed there for days, lost in a blur of pain and regret. Slowly he started to recover. Therapy helped. Work helped. He picked up his guitar again, even surfed a few times, trying to recapture pieces of his former self. But the one question that haunted him was Jenna's. Did she think he abandoned her? Would she ever forgive him? The guilt was crushing. Thankfully, Jon didn't fight this battle alone. We stood by him, checking in, pulling him out of his darkness whenever he tried to sink back in. And our wives? They went after Alicia like an unstoppable force, making sure she wouldn't get away with any of it. Jon wasn't okay. Not yet. But he wasn't alone. And that made all the difference. Jon's friends and their spouses didn't just offer words of sympathy, they took action. They put together a care package for him, filled with his favorite snacks, books, and handwritten notes of encouragement. They took turns cooking meals for him to ensure he wasn't just surviving on takeout. More than anything, they made sure he wasn't alone, inviting him to family gatherings, movie nights, and anything else that could lift his spirits. Jon had never expected this level of support, and it made all the difference. It reminded him that he wasn't in this fight alone. At the same time, we, his closest friends, had been quietly planning behind the scenes. We all pooled our money together because we knew Jon would need an excellent lawyer. After thorough research, we found someone who specialized in high-conflict divorce and custody battles. A lawyer known for winning and getting results. When we handed Jon the retainer fee and told him, "We're all in this together," he hesitated. He was terrified of making things worse for Jenna, terrified of losing her entirely. What if I fight and lose? What if she hates me for it? He asked. We reassured him. Being a father isn't just about biology, it's about love, presence, and protection. We reminded him that Jenna deserved to have him in her life. He had to fight for her. Eventually Jon agreed. He was still afraid, but this time he was determined. The legal battle. The divorce process was a nightmare. Jon's lawyer originally estimated that it would take 6 to 8 months, but thanks to Alicia's endless delays, it dragged on for 18 months. She fought every step of the way, from asset division to custody arrangements. She even tried to claim that the house was partially hers, despite the fact that Jon had bought it from his grandmother before they were even married. She missed court dates, delayed paperwork, and found every possible way to stall the process. She even tried to paint Jon as an unfit father, arguing that he worked too much. Rich, coming from someone who had been sneaking around with his own brother. She even tried to use his recent drinking against him, ignoring the fact that he only started drinking heavily after discovering her betrayal. But then Jon's lawyer dropped the bombshell evidence in court. The fake documents. The forged signatures. Over $200,000 in stolen money. The judge didn't see this as just a messy divorce anymore. This was fraud. Further investigation revealed years of financial deception. Alicia had been funneling money to Steven through fake business invoices. When the district attorney got involved, things escalated fast. Alicia was charged with fraud and forgery. She tried to pin everything on Steven, claiming he pressured her into it, but the evidence told a different story. To avoid prison, Alicia took a plea deal. 3 years of probation. 2 mandatory financial counseling. 3 full repayment of all the stolen money. The judge also restricted her custody rights. Jenna would only see her every other weekend during the daytime with a court-appointed supervisor present. No overnight stays. No trips out of state. It was harsh, but after everything she had done, she got off easy. Steven wasn't so lucky. When the court saw proof of his financial fraud, he was charged with forgery and theft. The judge wasn't lenient. Steven was sentenced to 2 years in prison. He too had to repay every dollar he had stolen, but since he was behind bars, that wouldn't be happening anytime soon. Their once perfect relationship crumbled fast. Without Jon's money to spend, Alicia and Steven turned on each other. In one of their final court hearings, they had a full-blown screaming match, blaming each other for their downfall. Alicia claimed Steven ruined her life. Steven called her a gold-digging fraud. It was pathetic to watch. Moving forward, after 16 months of legal battles, Jon was finally free. We took him out to celebrate when the divorce was finalized. He didn't say much that night, just sat there, exhausted but relieved. It was over. He could finally start over. But the biggest heartbreak was still Jenna. She had been struggling for a while. Who wouldn't? She had a therapist who helped her understand that Steven was her biological father, but Jon was still her real dad. One night, she asked Jon a question that broke him. "Can I still call you Dad?" He told me later that he cried for an hour after that. Jenna had no interest in building a relationship with Steven. It shocked everyone except Jon. She had seen how much Steven had hurt Jon, and that was enough for her. Steven tried buying her love during his supervised visits, bringing her expensive gifts. She refused them all. One day she told the court-appointed supervisor, "I don't want to spend time with him." Smart kid. A new beginning. Life slowly started falling into place again. To celebrate, we had one last gathering at my beach house. A final moment to reflect on everything that had happened. Jon thanked us for everything we had done for him. He even made a joke about finally getting his life back together. That night he played with the kids, laughing, throwing them in the air, making them giggle. You could see it, he loved being a dad. He looked at all of us and said, "You guys are my family." And he meant it. We weren't just friends anymore. We were brothers, bound together by one of the most insane, heartbreaking, and life-changing experiences of our lives. Here's a powerful lesson your audience can take from this story. True family isn't always about blood. It's about love, loyalty, and the people who stand by you when everything falls apart. Jon's story teaches us that betrayal can come from those closest to us, but real strength lies in choosing to fight for what matters. His friends, his chosen family, proved that genuine support can help someone rise from their lowest point. And most importantly, Jenna showed us that love isn't about DNA. It's about who's truly there for you. If you've ever faced betrayal, heartbreak, or hardship, remember, you are not alone. There are people who will stand by you, help you rebuild, and remind you of your worth. Do you resonate with this story? Have you ever experienced something similar or seen true friendship in action? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if you found this story meaningful, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more powerful real-life stories. Your support helps bring more content like this to people who need to hear it.